At 7:12 a.m., the house trembled softly. 3 knocks, measured and heavy, folding through wood and years. Beyond the glass, the sea was pewter gray, the sky undecided, and the air had that stillness that only comes before intrusion. I hadn't touched my coffee yet, but I could already taste the day bitter. If this touched your heart, like and subscribe to help us keep these stories alive. Share in the comments where you're watching from and the moment that struck you, so others can find strength in your words. I waited a beat, then opened the door on the chain. A woman in her 30s stood there in a slate coat that had never seen rain. "Tessa Pike," she announced, chin lifted, smile like a sealed envelope. Behind her, a tall man with a courier's bag, steady eyes, polite mouth. "My brother Ronan," she said, "we're here to help you with everything." Everything is a word that arrives with a truck. "I didn't call for help," I said, "and you're 2 houses early. Kestrel Lane ends at the lighthouse." Tessa's smile thinned. "It's about Victor," she said, suddenly softening the edges. "We know you and our father were close. With his estate unsettled, we thought you shouldn't be alone. Grief does things." I studied the siblings. Their shoes were wrong for this town, the kind that sink into boardwalk cracks. Their posture said boardrooms and borrowed sincerity. I unhooked the chain, not to invite them in, but to step outside. "My name is Marjorie Hale," I said, "and I have my own coffee." They crossed the threshold anyway, as if thresholds existed only for other people. The house on Kestrel Lane had once kept a widow and a son alive through winter with quilts and clam chowder and a stove that hummed like a cello. Later it kept secrets, because that is what good houses do. Victor and I had known each other 30 years, the last 10 as the sort of friends who understood what silence meant when the hospital rang after midnight. He bought this place when his hands still trusted ladders. He left the deed to a trust I now stewarded until its terms ripened. People in town assumed the house would someday pass, naturally, to his children. People in town assume many things about other people's paper. Tessa set a box of herbal teas on my counter without asking, then started talking as if history were a coat she could wear better than I, pulling everything together for the probate will be involved, she said. "Ronan will handle the spreadsheets, I'll handle the conversations. You can focus on your health. Dad always worried about your memory." "That's so," I said. Ronan unrolled a tabbed folder. "There's a form we can sign to streamline decisions," he offered lightly, the way a dentist offers a sucker after a painful thing. "Durable power of." I laughed, which surprised all 3 of us. "Let's not try the front door of that house," I said, and gestured toward the sea. "You'll find the back gate locked as well." The kettle clicked off. I poured coffee into the heaviest mug I owned. It steadied the hand. The siblings glanced at each other, the micro-muscle flicker of a plan revising itself. "We know about the trust," Tessa said at last. "Dad talked in the end. He was worried it could be misinterpreted." "It is an odd verb, to misinterpret a deed." "He told me where the keys were," I said, "and where the cassette was." That landed like a small stone in still water. Ronan's eyes moved, the way a man's eyes move when he sketches the room for exits. "Cassette." "An old habit of his," I said, "talking to tape when he didn't trust paper." I sipped. "He thought ink could be forged, but voice has a spine." Tessa tried kindness like a jacket. "We're not here to fight," she said. "We just want to make sure you're looked after, alone in a house like this after surgery." "After surgery," I said evenly, "I asked for a month of quiet. Your father delivered soup twice and news never. He understood that help is a door you knock once, not a hinge you wear out." Silence gathered in the kitchen. The Atlantic pushed its breath through the windows, old, even-tempered. They didn't ask where the cassette was. The smart ones don't. They go looking. While I rinsed the mug, they drifted into the front room, past Victor's model of the Avril lighthouse, past the framed tide chart from the year the winter ice broke late and every gull in town learned new maps. I heard a drawer, the small scold of wood. "May I see your phone?" I asked over my shoulder. "Either of you." Tessa's smile returned, a little shinier. "We left them in the car." "Good," I said. "Then you won't mind if I turn on the porch camera. It's touchy about guests." Ronan made a sound that wanted to be a laugh and wasn't. In a mirror on the mantel, I saw his eyes track the corners of the ceiling. When they finally asked to sit, I let them. It is a generosity to let someone sit where the truth will be heavy. Dad never meant to cut us out, Tessa said, not looking at the windows. He made mistakes, especially at the end. We're fixing them. You'll forgive me, I said, if I read the instruments you're playing before I agree to the tune. Ronan placed the tabbed folder on the coffee table, pushed it toward me as if sliding a plate. Inside, a consent form for a cognitive assessment I had not requested, a pre-filled change of address card for Victor's mail, and a typed letter to the bank requesting access to assist a vulnerable friend. Did you bring a pen, I asked, or would you prefer mine? His face did a new thing. We're only streamlining, I finished for him. Yes, I know that word. I stood not quickly, but fully, the way a person stands when they have a spine and a house that remembers it. I took their folder, walked to the stove, and laid the papers on a cold pan. I didn't burn them. I am not dramatic. I watched the ink as if it might tell me what it thought of itself. It told me it had been printed yesterday at 3:19 p.m. on a color laser with a light magenta cartridge going pale. You can hear such things if you've ever listened to a life crack in a hospital and had to decide which pieces mattered. Here, what we'll do, I said quietly. You'll have coffee. You'll tell me exactly who told you the trust could be misinterpreted. Then you'll walk me through the timeline of your arrival, starting with the email you sent to the agency to schedule an assessment I did not ask for, and ending with the moment you decided to come in through my door instead of trying the decent one. There is a hush that comes to a room when entitlement meets a ledger. Ronan swallowed, copied a long breath from somewhere, and gave me a version of a version. The bank had declined their change request. The agency had emailed me by mistake the confirmation meant for them. The house, however, seemed porous to them in the way coastal houses often do to people who spend more time on listings than on porches. A neighbor had said I might be slipping. Someone in town always says someone is slipping. It keeps the gossip clearer than the conscience. And the cassette, I asked. Ronan's mouth made the slightest movement toward Tessa. She did not quite shake her head. They were good at not speaking with faces. When they left, yes, they did eventually leave, because even the determined remember parking meters. I stood alone in the front room and let the house play back its small noises. Wood returning to itself, the faint tick of a metal duct cooling, far-off gulls rearranging the sky. I walked to the bookcase Victor had built from schoolhouse planks. My hand found the right groove on the third shelf. A panel gave way at the bottom with the gentle stubbornness of old carpentry. Inside, an honest machine, a battered cassette recorder, the same model nurses brought into rooms when men wanted to make sense before morphine wrote them into other alphabets. I pressed play. Static, then Victor's voice, not heroic, just present. If you're hearing me, it means I remembered where I hid you before the kids remembered where they hid themselves. Forgive the mess. We're none of us tidy at the end. A breath, a wave. The trust stands, he said, not because I wanted to punish anyone, because I wanted the house to go to the town fund that keeps old people in old houses when taxes forget mercy. The kids will be fine. They were fine when I fixed roofs and forgave mistakes. They will be fine after. He paused as if looking at the window I was looking at. If they try the door through you, he said, close it, then call Ellen. He coughed, but there was a smile in the cough. And tell them the thing I couldn't say to their faces without making it cruel: love is not a transfer. I stopped the tape and sat with my hand still on the player. I made 2 calls. The first to Ellen, who already had her shoes on. The second to Chief Muir, who knew my name because this town isn't large, and because people who volunteer at the library end up holding keys to more than buildings. I told him I had visitors who were practicing a kind of story that often ends with someone, confused, becoming convenient. Do you feel safe? He asked. I feel awake, I said. Good, he said. Awake people are harder to move. The chief came by in a plain car and stood in the kitchen with his hat in his hands, the way decent men stand when a woman of a certain age sets a mug in front of them. He watched the clip from the porch camera. Tessa's voice lowered at the door as she rehearsed guardianship, and he nodded once like a signature that remembers its own lines. He suggested I print and post a notice, which Ellen emailed over 13 minutes later. No access without written consent. All interactions recorded. Unauthorized attempts will be referred to council. It is a small poem when you read it out loud. 3 days of quiet followed, then a letter with a thoughtful return address. A boutique firm in the city whose website spoke in white space and verbs. Inside, a friendly reminder to revisit the trust in light of evolving family needs, signed by a lawyer whose pen curated apologies. Ellen phoned them before I finished my coffee. They phoned back with different adjectives. On Friday, the doorbell rang again. Not knocks, not certainty. A doorbell is a question. Ronan stood alone, no folder, no bag. I brought the key from Dad's old desk, he said, holding up a small brass thing tangled in a shoelace. I figured you'd need it. I opened the door. I have it already, I said. He kept duplicates like a man who knew about storms. Ronan nodded, the kind of nod men practice when they are deciding whether to be smaller or simply honest. May I come in, he asked, without paper. I let him. He stood in the front room and looked everywhere good sons look when they are deciding if they have been, in fact, good. He saw the model lighthouse, the tide chart, the chair with the dent where Victor napped on Saturdays when naps still felt like exercise. He sat on the edge of the sofa like a man who might leave quickly if leaving were the correct verb. I told myself, he said, not looking at me, that we were protecting you from being alone. It was easier than admitting we were protecting ourselves from not getting what we thought we were owed. I did not make the sound people make when they want to be thanked for their suffering. I need to say the sentence the way it actually is, he went on, each word placed like a careful step on ice. We tried to move a thing that wasn't ours. We tried to use you as a hinge. And your sister, I asked. Tessa is good at deciding the shape of a room, he said. It makes her think she built it. He held out a plain envelope. I did not take it. It's an apology, he said, because he had practice explaining envelopes. And a signature withdrawing anything we filed. And a letter to the town fund saying, we'll match what Dad left to keep 3 other houses alive in winter. He looked at me then, finally, not as a problem or a gate, but as a person holding a house upright with a spine and a memory and a tape recorder old enough to be honest. Do you need me to do anything else? He asked. The right question at last, the one men ask when they want to touch wood rather than veneer. Yes, I said, I need you not to do several things. I told him. He wrote them down in a small notebook that had no logo. When he left, I sat in Victor's chair and listened to the house relearn a quieter air. The kettle wanted a story. I let it sing once and then took it off. I played the cassette again, this time only the middle. Love is not a transfer. It is a sentence I have begun to use for other things. Casseroles, holidays, rides to clinics, grief. If there is a liturgy for old age, it could be that one line, spoken without bitterness and with a hand open over a table people can sit at and not own. I made pancakes, finally, because I wanted them, and because the recipe card in Victor's block printing had a coffee ring that looked like a coin someone pressed into the paper to remember a promise. Outside, the lighthouse blinked its slow syllables. The tide nosed the shore and pretended it didn't own anything it touched. I turned off the porch camera for the first time in a month and opened the windows. The house breathed, the way old houses do when they are relieved of an audience, when they are allowed to be a place instead of a prize. And I read, slow and steady, the way people read when they trust they will not be interrupted by a plan that calls itself love. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.